In 1953, a woman named Bridie Connolly stood at a turf fire in a two-room cottage outside Roscommon with nothing in the pot but 3 potatoes, a heel of bacon, and water she carried from the well that morning. She fed 5 children with it. That meal is number 4 on this list. Number 17 was so looked down upon that women in Dublin drew the curtains before they put it on the table. Number 9 kept families alive along the western seaboard for generations before anyone thought to write it down. Hi, my name is Peter, and this is Lost Irish Foods. Number 25. Potato soup. Not the creamy blended potato soup you get in a hotel carvery with a swirl of cream on top and a bread roll on the side. Not that. This was 3 or 4 potatoes, an onion, water, and salt. That was your recipe. The potatoes were peeled and diced and boiled until they fell apart in the pot. The onion went in raw at the start and disappeared into the broth by the time it was ready. Sometimes a small bit of butter went in at the end if there was any. Most nights there was not. In Connaught and Donegal in the 1950s, this soup appeared on the table 4 or 5 nights a week in the winter months. It cost almost nothing. It filled the stomach. And for a family of 6 living on a small holding with no running water and no electricity, filling the stomach was the whole objective. Your grandmother did not call this a starter. It was the meal. Number 24. Dripping on bread. When a joint of bacon or a bit of beef had been roasted, the fat that collected in the pan was not thrown away. It was poured into a jar and kept on the shelf beside the range. That was dripping. Spread cold and thick on a slice of bread, it was a dinner. Not a snack, not a side. A dinner. The dripping carried the flavor of whatever meat had produced it. Smoky if it came from bacon. Richer if it came from beef. Children in Dublin tenements in the 1950s grew up eating dripping sandwiches for their tea and thinking nothing of it. Today, a jar of beef dripping at a farmer's market costs €4 and gets sold as a gourmet product. Your grandfather spread it on a heel of bread and called it Tuesday. Number 23. Boiled bacon and cabbage. Before I say anything else, I want to be clear. This is not the pale, waterlogged version that gives boiled bacon a bad name. The version your grandmother made was different. A piece of collar bacon, the cheap cut, simmered low and slow for 2 hours in a pot, with a head of cabbage added at the end, and a few floury potatoes on the side. The fat from the bacon turned the cooking water into something close to a broth. The cabbage absorbed that liquid and tasted nothing like boiled cabbage tastes when you do it wrong. In Leinster and Munster, this was the Sunday dinner when there was enough money for bacon. On weeks when there was not, there was just cabbage and potatoes. The same pot. Half the ingredients. Your grandmother never mentioned which weeks were which. Number 22. Stirabout. Stirabout is oatmeal porridge, and in the 1950s it was not just breakfast. It was dinner. It was supper. It was whatever meal you needed it to be when there was nothing else. Coarse oatmeal stirred into boiling water over a low flame until it thickened into something dense and filling. A spoon of buttermilk on the side, maybe a pinch of salt. In rural Ireland, stirabout was made in a 3-legged pot hung over the open fire, and the stirring was done with a wooden stick called a spurtle. You stirred clockwise, always clockwise. I have no idea why, but every grandmother I have ever spoken to insists on this, and I am not arguing with any of them. Number 21. Champ. Mashed potatoes with scallions and butter and hot milk. That is champ. It sounds simple. It is simple. But the version your grandmother made was not simple in the way it tasted. The potatoes had to be fleury. That matters more than any other instruction in this recipe. Waxy potatoes make champ wrong. The scallions were stirred through while the potato was still hot, so they softened slightly. The butter went in cold, in a lump in the center, and the tradition was to dip each spoonful into the melted pool before you ate it. In Tyrone and Armagh and Down, champ was the Tuesday dinner, a full pot of it, a meal in itself. You did not need meat if the butter was good and the potatoes were floury and the scallions were fresh from the garden. Number 20, colcannon. Colcannon is champ's older, more serious cousin. It is mashed potato with cooked kale or Savoy cabbage worked through it. More butter than you think is reasonable. Hot milk, salt. In the 1950s, colcannon was the Halloween dish. A ring was hidden inside it, a coin, sometimes a thimble. The child who found the ring in their bowl would marry young. The one who found the thimble would not marry at all. My grandmother found the thimble 3 Halloweens in a row. She was married at 19. So, make of that what you will. But beyond Halloween, colcannon was the weeknight dinner of every rural Irish household that had a pot, a fire, and a cabbage plant in the garden. 3 things almost everyone had. Number 19, nettles soup. Every ditch and laneway in rural Ireland grew nettles. They grew without anyone asking them to. They required no tending, no money, and no trip to any shop. In the 1950s, women picked them in spring wearing whatever gloves they had, brought them inside, and boiled them into a soup with an onion, a potato to thicken it, and a knot of butter. The sting disappeared entirely in the cooking. What was left was a dark green soup with an earthy, almost mineral flavor that tasted expensive and cost nothing. Nettles are extraordinarily high in iron and vitamins. Your grandmother did not know that in those words. She knew her children needed feeding, and the ditch was full of food that nobody else was taking. Number 18, boxty. Boxty is a potato pancake made from a mixture of raw grated potato and mashed cooked potato, combined with flour, salt, and buttermilk, then fried on a griddle or a pan. The raw potato gave it a dense, almost chewy texture in the center. The outside crisped in the fat. In Cavan, Leitrim, and Fermanagh, there is a rhyme. Boxty on the griddle, boxty on the pan. If you cannot make boxty, you will never get a man. I am going to leave that one where it is. What I will say is that boxty stretched a small amount of potato into a dinner that felt substantial. The griddle version was cut into quarters and eaten hot with butter. In the 1950s, it appeared whenever the potato supply was running low and needed to last another few days. Number 17, sheep's head broth. This is the one where the curtains got drawn. I mentioned it in the hook, and here it is. A sheep's head cost almost nothing at the butcher in the 1950s because nobody with money wanted it. The woman of the house would split it, clean it thoroughly, and simmer it for 3 or 4 hours with a turnip, a carrot, pearl barley, and an onion. The broth that resulted was rich and deeply savory. The meat that came off the skull, the cheeks especially, was tender and sweet. In the west of Ireland, this was not considered strange. It was considered sensible. In Dublin and the larger towns, it carried a stigma. Poor people's food. That stigma was wrong. The soup was good, and it fed families who needed feeding. The curtains were unnecessary. The pot was the point. There is something that does not get talked about enough when people discuss Irish food from the 1950s. It is not the poverty, although the poverty was real. It is the silence around the poverty. Mothers did not sit their children down and explain that tonight's dinner existed because there was no money for anything else. They just cooked it. They put it on the table, called everyone in, and filled the bowls. The meal appeared. That was the whole act of love. These dishes were not labeled survival food in any kitchen. They were just dinner. The bowl in front of you was warm, and it was full, and someone had stood at a fire to make it happen. That mattered more than what was in it. Number 16. Dublin Coddle. Coddle was born in the liberties of Dublin. Sausages and bacon rashers, the cheaper cuts, simmered in layers with sliced onion and potato in enough water to cover everything. The pot went on low, and it stayed there. The sausages gave the broth a fatty, savory depth. The potato absorbed everything. The bacon collapsed into the liquid. Coddle was made on Thursdays in Dublin because Friday was a fish day under Catholic rules. And Thursday was when you used up whatever was left in the larder. Jonathan Swift mentioned it. James Joyce ate it. My uncle Declan ate it every Thursday of his life until 1989. And he claims it cured a chest cold he had in 1974. I cannot verify that. Number 15. Tripe and onions. Tripe is the stomach lining of a cow. I know, stay with me. In Cork City in the 1950s, tripe and onions was not an unusual dinner. It was sold pre-cleaned and pre-cooked at butchers on the Coal Quay market and eaten at home, simmered in milk with sliced onions until the sauce thickened and the tripe turned soft. The texture is unlike anything else. Slightly chewy, almost silky in places. The flavor is mild, and it absorbs whatever you cook it in. In Cork, the combination of tripe, drisheen, and onions was called packet and tripe. Drisheen is a black pudding made from sheep's blood. It was the working man's dinner. Today, one butcher in Cork City still sells it. 1. Number 14. Crubines. Crubines are pig's feet, boiled for hours until the skin softened and the gelatinous meat around the bones loosened enough to pull away. They were eaten cold, usually at a fair or a market, wrapped in a piece of paper and eaten with your hands. The cartilage, the skin, the small pieces of sweet meat between the bones. In Munster and Connaught, crubines were sold at cattle fairs and outside pub doors on a Saturday night in the 1950s. They cost pennies. They required no cutlery and no plate. A man coming home from a fair with crubines in his coat pocket was not doing badly. He had eaten. He had something left for the road. That was enough. Number 13. Yellow meal porridge. Yellow meal is coarse ground maize. It came to Ireland during the famine as emergency food, and the Irish never fully forgave it for that. It was called Peel's brimstone, after Robert Peel, who imported it, and the association with the worst years of the 19th century meant it carried shame into the 20th. But in the 1950s, in Connaught and Clare and Kerry, yellow meal porridge was still being made. Boiled thick with water and salt, and eaten with buttermilk poured over it. It was cheap, it was filling, and it kept the hunger away for hours. The shame around it was a colonial hangover. The meal itself was good. Nobody said that out loud. Number 12. Blind stew. Blind stew meant a stew with no meat in it. Potatoes, turnip, carrot, onion, and water. Sometimes a knob of butter added at the end. The name came from the idea that the pot looked like a stew. It smelled like a stew. But if you looked closely, there was nothing in it that had ever walked or swum. In Donegal and Mayo in the 1950s, blind stew appeared on the table during the weeks before the harvest, when the previous year's stores were running low, and there was nothing left to add to the pot except what grew in the ground. Children ate it without complaint, not because they did not notice there was no meat, but because they understood, even when young, that the pot was full, and that was what mattered tonight. Number 11. Spailpin stew. The Spailpini were migrant laborers, men who walked from Connaught to Leinster and Munster each harvest season, sleeping in barns and ditches, working for whatever they were paid, and eating whatever was available. Their stew was made from whatever scraps a farmer's wife would spare: a bit of turnip, some oatmeal stirred in to thicken it, an onion, sometimes a small piece of fatty bacon. The oatmeal was the ingredient that made it different. It thickened the broth into something that clung to the ribs. In the 1950s, the spalpin tradition was fading, but the stew remained in the cottages of the West as the dinner you made when the week had used everything up and there were still 2 days left before the next penny came in. Number 10. Dulse and potatoes. Dulse is a dark reddish seaweed harvested from rocks along the northern coastline of Ireland, particularly in Antrim and Derry. In the 1950s, it was sold dried at markets and fairs in paper bags. You could chew it dry as a snack, or soak it and cook it. Combined with boiled floury potatoes, dulse made a coastal dinner that cost almost nothing if you lived near the shore or had access to a market. The seaweed added a deep, salty, almost smoky flavor to the potato. It is extraordinarily rich in minerals. The families who ate it regularly were not eating it for health reasons. They were eating it because the sea was there, it was free, and potatoes needed something. Number 9. Limpet soup. Limpets are the small cone-shaped shellfish that cling to rocks at the waterline on every beach in Ireland. In the 1950s, along the Connemara coast and the islands of Mayo and Galway, limpets were collected at low tide in buckets. They were prized off the rocks with a knife, brought home, and simmered in water with onion, a potato, and whatever herbs were available. The resulting broth was intensely flavored of the sea, deep and briny in a way that nothing bought from a shop could replicate. This was the dinner of island communities and coastal families for whom the tide going out meant the larder filling up. The sea fed people who had nothing else. This soup is the proof. Here is something the history books do not say clearly enough. The 1950s in Ireland was not just a decade of poverty, it was a decade of leaving. Between 1950 and 1960, 400,000 people emigrated from the Republic of Ireland alone. That is nearly 1 in 8 of the entire population. When a family's eldest son took the boat to Birmingham or the plane to Boston, he did not just take himself. He took the appetite that the mother had been cooking for. He took the extra bowl that needed filling. And in some households, when he left, the pot got smaller. Not because there was more food, because there was one less reason to cook a full dinner. The meals on this list were made in that silence too. Number 8. Corned beef hash. When a small piece of corned beef had been boiled for Sunday dinner, what was left on Monday went into a hash. The leftover beef was chopped small and fried in a pan with diced cooked potato and onion until the edges crisped and the whole thing bound together with the fat from the pan. An egg could be cracked on top if there were eggs. If there were not, the hash was the dinner on its own. In Belfast and Dublin working-class households in the 1950s, Monday hash was as reliable as the week itself. It was the meal that proved nothing got wasted. Sunday's joint became Monday's dinner, and there was honor in that. There was intelligence in that. Your grandmother did not call it zero-waste cooking. She called it Monday. Number 7. Turnip and potato mash. Equal parts boiled turnip and boiled floury potato, mashed together with butter and salt until the two vegetables became one. The turnip cut the heaviness of the potato and gave the mash a slightly sweet, almost peppery edge. The color was a pale yellow. It looked like nothing special on the plate. It tasted like a thing that had been made with care. In the Midlands and the West, this mash was the base of the weeknight dinner when there was no meat and no pretending otherwise. It was eaten with a glass of buttermilk on the side and a slice of soda bread if there was any. This is a meal that has no champion. No restaurant serves it. No chef has claimed it. It belongs entirely to the kitchens where it was made. Number 6. Bacon, ribs, and cabbage. Not the collar joint. The ribs. The bones. The cheapest cut of the pig. The part the butchers sold for almost nothing because there was so little actual meat on them. Simmered for a long time with a tightly packed head of cabbage cut into quarters and a few potatoes on the side. The ribs gave the water an intensity of flavor that more expensive cuts could not match because the bone and the connective tissue did something to the broth that pure meat never does. The children got the potatoes and the cabbage. The adults stripped whatever meat there was off the ribs with their fingers and ate it standing at the counter while they served the children at the table. That detail is in every story I have ever heard about this meal. The children at the table, the adults standing. Number 5. White pudding dinner. White pudding is a sausage made from pork meat, fat, oatmeal, and spices. It is not as well known as black pudding, but in the 1950s, it was a dinner in its own right in Munster and Connaught. Thick slices were fried in a dry pan until the casing crisped and the inside stayed soft and dense. They were served with fried potato slices and a spoon of leftover dripping on the side. A ring of white pudding cost pennies at the butcher. It fed a family of 4. The oatmeal inside stretched the meat further than the meat alone could go. Your grandmother was not making the best of a bad situation when she put white pudding on the table. She was making a dinner, a real one. Number 4. Bread soup. A meal so humble it barely has a name. Stale soda bread broken into pieces in a bowl, hot water poured over it with a small knob of butter and a pinch of salt. Sometimes a splash of buttermilk instead of water. That was it. That was bread soup. In the cottages of the west of Ireland in the 1950s, this was not unusual. When the bread had gone hard and there was nothing else, the bread became the soup, and the soup became the dinner. Bakers gave away yesterday's bread at the end of the day. Families collected it. The woman who made bread soup out of a hardened heel of a soda loaf was not admitting defeat. She was using every last thing available to her and feeding her children with it, and not one of them went to bed hungry because of her. Number 3. Oatmeal stirabout with buttermilk. This one deserves its own place, separate from the stirabout I mentioned earlier, because this version was specifically the evening meal in large parts of rural Ireland throughout the 1950s. Not a quick bowl, a full pot. Coarse oatmeal cooked down until thick and heavy, spooned into wide bowls, with cold buttermilk poured around the outside of the mound, so the hot and the cold met at the rim of the bowl. You ate from the outside in. Each spoonful caught a bit of the hot oatmeal and the cold sour buttermilk together. The combination is extraordinary, and almost nobody eats it now. The buttermilk provided protein and probiotics that nobody named as such, but everybody understood. This dinner cost less than tuppence, and it built generations of people who worked from dawn to dusk on it and did not fall down. Number 2. Bacon ribs broth with pearl barley. Take the leftover water from boiling bacon ribs. Do not pour it away. That liquid is the base of this broth. Add pearl barley, a diced turnip, a carrot, and onion, and let it simmer for an hour until the barley swells and the broth thickens into something that is halfway between a soup and a stew. In the 1950s, in counties Galway, Roscommon, and Sligo, this broth was made the day after bacon ribs had been served, because nothing that had any flavor left in it was ever thrown away. The barley filled the stomach in a way that few other things could. It expanded slowly. An hour after you ate it, you were still full. 2 hours after you ate it, you were still full. That was not an accident. That was the whole engineering of the dish. Number 1. Dublin Coddle, the real version. I put coddle at number 16 earlier in this list because the weeknight version deserves its place. But the number 1 spot belongs to the version made on a Saturday night in a Dublin tenement in the 1950s, when the week was ending and what was left in the house was going into the pot. Everything went in. The last of the sausages, slightly past their best, the rashers that had been in the larder since Wednesday, the potatoes from the bag that needed using, the onion that had been sitting on the shelf all week, layers, everything in layers in the pot, with just enough water to cover it. The lid went on. The pot went on the lowest possible heat. And it sat there for 2, 3, 4 hours. The longer it sat, the better it got. By the time it came to the table, the sausages had given everything they had to the broth. The potatoes had absorbed all of it. The onion had dissolved entirely. What was in the bowl was not the sum of its parts. It was something that had been transformed by time and heat and the intelligence of a woman who knew that the cheapest ingredients in the world, treated with patience, become the most nourishing food on earth. That is Dublin coddle. That is #1. Make one of these this week, just one. Buy a heel of bacon and a head of cabbage. Pick nettles from the ditch at the end of your road if you know they are clean. Make a pot of stirabout on a Wednesday night and eat it with buttermilk, the way it was always meant to be eaten. Call your grandmother if she is still here. Ask her which of these she made. Ask her how she made it. Write it down on actual paper with an actual pen, because these recipes are not in any cookbook. They live in the memory of women who never measured a single thing and got it right every time. Sit down at the table. Set a place. Use a real bowl. Eat slowly. Because these dinners were never about being poor. They were about refusing to let poverty be the last word. The pot was always the answer. The woman standing over it always knew that. Tell me in the comments which of these your family still makes. Tell me if your grandmother made coddle or boxty or sheep's head broth. Tell me if anyone else's grandmother drew the curtains before she put the pot on the table. Because these are not just recipes. They are the proof that the simplest food made in one pot, in one kitchen, in one hard decade, can still be an act of love.